Christmas 1922, Cambridge. Patrick Blackett ran his fingers through Thomas Barrow's hair as they lay next to one another in the man's bed. Viscous sunlight oozed through the window, and Thomas thought it ought to have been applauded, having managed to penetrate the dense cloud blanket. "He often talked about you," Blackett told him. "Not often. Sometimes. I always wondered what you looked like." "About how much of me did you wonder?" he asked. Blackett leaned over and kissed his lips. "Oh, not much, at first." "You made him very happy, I do know that." "Ashby was greatest man I ever knew," Blackett added. "Humorous. Humane. Quick-witted. Unfailingly kind. As well as his keen ability to be able to sense the answer to a problem before he had even put pencil to paper, and extremely good-looking. And I wondered, if a man can make my friend this happy, I want to meet this man." "Well, it is a good job Milo is as keenly intelligent as her brother, isn't it? Because otherwise, you wouldn't have come to Downton Abbey to hear her speak." Thomas leaned up and smoothed a hand over Blackett's chest, and Patrick Blackett nuzzled his mouth to Thomas's neck. Oh God, that was good. They had already kept each other up as it were most of the night. Once more, he wouldn't say no to that. "I saw you beside your clock," Blackett went on, looking at it as a parent might a child, protecting it from the professor's words about relativity. "I found that all rather interesting. I wish I understood more of it," Thomas replied, turning over and returning the kiss. Then he noticed the packet that he had brought with him the night before. He had not gone to the Rutherfords' home immediately last night, as the train had arrived into Cambridge at too late an hour. So he was walking into town, wondering about getting a bed for the night when, on meeting Blackett in the Don's pub on the corner of Marsh Lane, accepted the man's offer of going to a club, and then back onto his room. Thomas closed his eyes and steeled himself to bring their encounter to an end. Milo was not expecting Thomas to arrive that morning, and he wanted to be at the Cavendish laboratory before she began work. The package was two gifts for her, for it was unlikely that they would see one another at Christmas, and New Year's Day was her birthday. Henry, his brother, had been very generous with a lavalier when he had been to see him, a long necklace that was the fashion just then, which he had adapted to add a timepiece at the end. Milo could not wear her watch properly at work, with the risk of spills to damage it, so Henry had fashioned a diminutive pocket watch onto a long gold chain which she could wear around her neck and slip into her pocket when she was working. Henry had been rather taken with Milo ever since she had come to his shop to insist that he repair a damaged watch once belonging to their mother that had never worked properly in all the time she had had it, and had refused to the point of aggression the money Thomas had offered him for the lavalier watch. And there was another reason for his visit, Thomas reminded himself. As well as Blackett, Milo was yet to discuss the incident that must have transpired in June, nor yet the circumstances in August. How much did she know he knew? How much was she aware of herself? "It is a pity about Miss Ashby," Blackett told Thomas, as he returned the kiss, focusing his mind away from the hateful thing Branson had done to her, dousing his fire of anger with a flood of desire. "She was always so happy coming with me, and the boys were as protective of her as anyone could be. I wonder how it will be for her now." Thomas broke off and leaned away from his lover. "Sorry, you've lost me." "What's a pity about Milo?" "The change in lab. She is to work with a new set of colleagues, a younger group of people put up from their universities, the best in the world, so I'm told," he added. "It will be strange not seeing her around." But that reassurance in Blackett's voice did not pacify Thomas. Quite the opposite. "Professor Thompson's idea," he added. "Miss Ashby is only young, yet, and he considered it would be good to have people of her own age around, including his own son, George. Likely she will be working with them if she goes to conference she'll need to in order for her doctorate." "When is she 19? "New Year's Day," Thomas told him. "After everything she's been through, she seems older." "Will you write? Let me know how she is?" I got, letters every so often from Professor Rutherford, and Chadwick, of course. You will know what I need to hear." Blackett said nothing for a moment, then smiled. "Of course I can do that for you, Barrow. he told Thomas. "You mustn't worry, Professor Thompson is supervising the youngsters. A stricter, more disciplined man you have never met. Miss Ashby has no fear of advances from any of them under Thompson." Blackett reluctantly let Thomas go, and he sat up, looking for his neatly folded clothes, and began to dress. He had confided in Patrick Blackett. Thomas knew he needed someone for Milo's sake. What if it came flooding back to her, or she acted out of character? Thomas needed to know someone new, and he felt it would be awkward to talk to Rutherford, given his father-like figure in her life. Chadwick was a different matter. Thomas has never been sure of the man's intentions towards her, even if he had never given him any reason to think they were anything but genuine. Thomas suspected Chadwick disapproved of Thomas and Milo marrying, even if it did mean her potentially losing her place within the laboratory. "Can you come back this evening?" Blackett asked him. But Thomas shook his head. "I am lucky to have been able to get a day and a night together away from Downton at this time of year," Thomas told him. "His lordship is having cousins from London to visit. The place was in organised turmoil as I left, and it won't be much better when I get back." "Do you like your job?" Blackett asked him, as he got up himself. Unusually, the trim, neat ex-sailor Patrick Blackett had to hunt for his clothes carelessly strewn during their passionate foreplay the night before. A sock was hanging from the light fitting. Then again, Thomas thought, the tension between them has been incendiary. "I do," Thomas told him. "Order, discipline, hierarchy. I feel I have a place." Blackett nodded. It must be hard to be so as a working-class man. The more privileged a man was, the better. "Then do not be a stranger to Christ's Barrow," Blackett told him, approaching the door. Thomas made to pass, but Blackett drew a hand to Thomas's face, and then was kissing him so tenderly Thomas felt as if his heart was about to burst. If this was not a healthy, positive relationship, then Thomas did not know what was. Blackett would be coming to the laboratory at a suitable interval behind Thomas. He knew the sun had the advantage of the clouds now, and it speared its weak rays onto the road, as if illuminating the way he must go. Few people were up at this time, and one who was has hurried along High Street in the direction of the Cavendish, tall and thin as he was, carrying a large, brown suitcase, battered around one side as if it had been dropped from very high up. "Is this the way to the Cavendish laboratory?" the man asked, as he gained on Thomas. Thomas Barrow stopped, the American accent catching his attention. He was tall and thin, and looked as if he didn't partake in the customary 3 meals every day. "Possibly 3 a week." "It is," he told him. A look of relief flooded the man's face. "Say, I've been looking all over," the man continued. "I'm supposed to meet my professor there, and now I'm late." "I'm going that way," Thomas told him. "Are you sure?" the man asked, with the frothy enthusiasm Thomas remembered when he had been in America with Lord Grantham. "I wouldn't want to put you out." "No trouble," Thomas replied, and continued to walk with him. "Oppenheimer," the man said, striding with a little more ease than he had before. "Julius Robert Oppenheimer." He stopped and offered Thomas a hand. "Do you work at the Cavendish, Mr. Barrow?" Thomas told him, and took his hand perfunctorily. "Do you work at the Cavendish yourself?" What was it with the interrogation at 8 o'clock in the morning? "I don't," Thomas told him. "I am here to work with Professor Rutherford," Oppenheimer continued, enthusiastically. "My professor from Harvard recommended me when I put myself forward to the professor. It sure is swell to be here, in old England." Oppenheimer looked about him, at the houses and university buildings, mostly dormant on that muggy winter morning. "So, what brings you to Cambridge?" Oppenheimer continued. "The 6:30 train from York last night," Thomas told him. The young man stopped, and narrowed his eyes, searching for the connection. He had liked America when he had been, Thomas considered. The Levinsons had remembered Milo Mrs. Levinson congratulating him on their marriage when Lord Grantham let slip, and reminding him to tell her that she was indeed welcome to visit, and she had contacts at Princeton. Thomas glanced to Oppenheimer. Princeton was a different place to Harvard, he supposed, like Oxford was to Cambridge. And this American, though forward in his manner as all Americans that Thomas had met were, seemed different too, and he would be glad to see him to the Cavendish. "Here you are," he told Oppenheimer. "I hope you will do well here." "My thanks, my good fellow," Robert Oppenheimer told him. "I do not have a place here yet. In fact, I have not undertaken my undergraduate degree. But I will like it here afterwards," he mused. Oppenheimer strode past Thomas, and a thought struck him. He hoped he was wrong, but had a feeling he was not. He stood in the doorway, Chadwick's office to the left, and Rutherford's, where Thomas had stood when they had discussed Milo's disappearance in the summer, adjacent it. Milo not here yet. The basic tag system, whereby an employee had a wooden disc with their name upon it, was still turned to the wall, its red back indicating the worker was not yet in the building. They turned them over, Thomas knew, when they were inside, and took them with them if they were working within one of the particular laboratories. Chadwick's, Rutherford's and Blackett's were all facing the wall too, though Thompson's was facing the front, as was Hartree's and Cockcroft's. The thin face of John Cockcroft appeared at the far end of the corridor, and he smiled when he recognized Thomas, who was turning Milo's package over and over in his pocket. "You are welcome to wait," he told Thomas, and showed him into Chadwick's office. "Who's this?" "He says his name is Oppenheimer," Thomas told Cockcroft. "He was after directions here, and, well, I didn't exactly bring him, but he followed me anyway, and—" Thomas broke off when a crash came from across the hall. Cockcroft looked out through the office window, and Thomas looked where he was looking. A complicated piece of equipment seemed to have been pushed off balance, and a flask had landed on the floor. "Do you know him?" Professor Thompson might have mentioned the name, John Cockcroft admitted, "although Rutherford has said he will not take him, given he has not yet graduated, neither produced anything of merit. Instead, he told me he was here to see the laboratory for a future position," Thomas told him. Cockcroft narrowed his eyes. "There has been some talk of money being donated to Christ's from a banker by the name of Julius Oppenheimer," he told Thomas, darkly. "Both Thompson and Rutherford won't have him if he is not up to the job, even if money has changed hands." "Give him to Blackett, he'll sort him out," Thomas suggested. Cockcroft looked across to Thomas and smiled a cunning smile. "Now there's a thought, Mr. Barrow," he replied, then flung open the door of Chadwick's office and strode down the corridor. Thomas could see that Oppenheimer was taking it upon himself to inspect more experiments, and heard Cockcroft yelling furiously, "Mr. Oppenheimer, kindly keep your hands to himself." "What's this?" The Cavendish Building's door opened again, and Chadwick turned his tag round. He saw Thomas standing in his office doorway. "A Mr. Oppenheimer arrived at the same time I did," Thomas told him, and another crash reverberated along the corridor, followed by a thump. An aggrieved Cockcroft marched back up the corridor, a piece of metal about a foot long and 6 inches wide in his hand. If it was supposed to be semicircular, it no longer was. "I hope Professor Thompson knows what he's letting himself in for." It would seem his undergraduate tutor sent Mr. Oppenheimer because he did not know what else to do with him. He's not even qualified, for heavens. A crash from behind them made Chadwick turn. 3 glass flasks had come to the end of their usefulness, having been knocked over by Oppenheimer in his enthusiasm. Chadwick's eyes narrowed. "Take him to Thompson, for the love of God," Chadwick told Cockcroft, who nodded and strode off again. "He's going to be working with Milo?" Thomas asked. "Socially inept his wife may be, Lucina was both a paradigm of care and dexterity when it came to her experimentation work. She could craft an electrical circuit from a penny, Thomas was certain. And he hoped very much that James Chadwick's answer was going to be number. "Not my decision, Barrow," Chadwick told him, shaking his head. "Both Thompson and Rutherford both have agreed she needs a bit more discipline, a bit more guidance, given the summer. Thompson is very old school, which I think will suit her, but at least we might send back this dolt for some years if indeed he is not qualified." Another crash, and Chadwick turned, with determined purpose. "Will you kindly wait in my office, Mr. Oppenheimer?" called Chadwick. After a scintillation tube went the way of the flasks, and he marched Robert Oppenheimer along the corridor and made a show of gesturing past Thomas to the direction of a chair. "Professor Thompson will collect you from here, kindly wait." He closed the door, having beckoned Thomas out. "Milo will be here shortly," Chadwick told him. And, I won't be long. I have a gift for her." A click of the front door and Thomas turned to see Milo Ashby, now tall and slender, wrapped in a woolen coat with boots and a woolen shawl, gloves on her hands, too, he noticed. No matter how many pairs Mrs. Doyle had knitted the young Milo over the years, she always only ever seemed to have one, which, to Thomas's mind, was worse than none at all. Thomas Chadwick took a few steps back when he heard Milo's exclamation, and opened the door to Rutherford's office with what seemed like an afterthought as he strode down the corridor. Thomas took a step to her, and made to embrace her, his hands closing around hers, and Milo leaned in for a moment, as she used to. But then she froze, and pulled her hands back. Thomas felt his smile fall, and it was all he could do not to lose his temper. It had been the same when he had come to see Milo in September, and again a month later. And Thomas had told Jack Prue, uncorking his anger to a man who he knew not only understood, in the privacy of Milo's home, but also could do something about it. Not that he knew what it was Prue would, or could, do. But Branson had been at least looking rather unhappy recently. Instead, Thomas stepped into the office and held the door open for Milo, who walked sedately in, looking as Thomas closed the door carefully. "Did the professor walk with you this morning?" Thomas asked, as Milo stood there, in silence. He desperately wanted to tell her to tell him, but he knew the best thing to do was to keep in touch with Milo, visit when he could, write to her, encourage her to write to him. As he had told Ernest so many times, give her time. "Professor Rutherford goes across to the university most mornings," she told him, primly. "And you will be at his home at Christmas?" Milo nodded. There was only one place she could be. Branson was still at Downton, of course, so she wouldn't want to go back there unless he was gone, even with Prue there. He was doing a nice little trade in whiskey, Thomas reminded himself, and her aunt was living with other relatives in Bedfordshire, in exile from her Irish homeland, Daphne Castle, their home, in ruins because of the independence uprising. "So, I have a gift for you." Milo's face fell, and he knew it was the wrong thing to say. So focused she had been on her work, she had clearly forgotten something for him, and now that she had realized it, she would feel put out. Thomas noticed her opal necklace underneath her high-necked shirt and felt in his pocket for his watch. He pulled it out. Milo looked down, and a smile came to her lips. Thomas felt happy. This was Milo at her most genuine, no hidden feelings, no hidden worries. What a bastard, literally and figuratively, to have wrecked that part of her life. No matter what Prue was doing, Thomas was certainly going to continue to pay him out, slowly, bit by bit, fraction by fraction. "This is all I would ever want," Thomas told her. "That you went to Henry, that my brother speaks to me now." "Just," he added to himself, and this time Milo took his other hand, and he felt the warmth in it, despite the coldness of the day. "So will you please take this, from Henry's fair hand, my idea," he added, as Milo opened it. Her eyes widened as she took out the watch attached to a chain, holding it up to the light. Thomas knew he had chosen well. The crystal transparent casing caught the light and the Milo of her youth appeared before him again, and his heart beat a little faster. "It's beautiful." Milo looked from the watch to Thomas, and then threw her arms around him and he held her close. Poor Milo. She pulled away and Thomas took the watch from her hands and slipped it around her neck, past her hair, growing longer, and pinned into a roll at the back of her neck. Milo leaned up to kiss him on his cheek, but it was swift and she stepped away from him quickly. "Would you like to see what I do?" she asked. Thomas nodded, and Milo took him into one of the further labs, after a swift look in at the window of Chadwick's where Oppenheimer still sat. In the lab the shelves filled with bottles and jars and books, and in one corner was a desk. On it, several tools sat, and what looked like glass plates. Milo explained how she was preparing barium oxide plates for the collection of scintillations from alpha scattering experiments, and she explained she was still investigating the idea of relaying wireless telegraphy signals. "I'll come back for the third transmitter one of these days," she told him, and then, as footsteps came down the corridor, whispered to Thomas, "One day, I'll talk to you." "Not yet, though." "Not yet," he agreed, and turned to see Chadwick, who had opened the door. He let the doctor show him to the front of the Cavendish building, greeting Rutherford as he came in, and watching the professor's face as Chadwick took him aside and gestured to his own office, confiding a few words, change from upbeat geniality to shoulder-sagging resignation. "It is very good of you to bring Milo a present," Chadwick told Thomas as he showed him outside. A bicycle went by, and another. Academics were arriving at the college. One raised a hand to Chadwick. It was Blackett. "Of course. She is my wife," Thomas replied. He looked at Chadwick's face, which seemed to be concerned and determined. "Ashby, me Lucina, has not been the same since her fall," James Chadwick went on. "I do not want to know the details, but she will be 18 next week. Do you think it would be not unreasonable to let her go?" "Let her go?" Thomas repeated. He glanced back to the laboratory doors. "How could you give her some stability, get a position down here?" "Absolutely not," Thomas told him. "And no, I will not divorce her," Thomas told him. "I am sorry for you, Chadwick." James Chadwick inhaled. Thomas thought so. Ernest's closest friends had wanted to marry her after all. Even if Thomas had ever considered it, how could he, now, after all she had been through? "That is very selfish, Mr. Barrow. I implore you to think on it and change your mind." "For Milo's sake?" "I won't," Thomas told him. "For Milo's sake?" And he then turned back to Chadwick. "Merry Christmas," he added, then strode up Free School Lane. Thomas was absolutely determined to support his wife, Milo's well-being deep his mind, and revenge in his heart.